Hello, everyone, and today I'm going to talk about the Big Brother Almost Backdoors. A bit ago, I made a video talking about backdoors, where I went over the rules of what consists of a backdoor, and now I'm going to talk about the ones that just missed that qualification. And the one that I'm discussing today are for the people who weren't the initial target. And if you're not the initial target, then you technically weren't backdoored, since the whole point of it is the fact that you had to be the target from the beginning. So there's 37 people on this list, and I'm going to break them down. I also have to mention that I didn't have a laptop for a week, so I couldn't really get anything out there, and the few videos I deleted from here and put on my other channel, I did by phone, so I should be more active now. Now let's just get to the video. Okay, so there was 36 people instead of 37 people. But either way, at 36 is Kathy from BB12. So the first set of people on this list are the ones who also played in the veto, as well as not being the initial target. So it makes their backdoorness even lower on the list, since if you automatically play for veto, you weren't backdoored. So these people are the ones who weren't the initial target and also played in the veto. In Kathy's case, she wasn't even on the block the entire week, and literally the only reason why she ended up on the block was because Matt, the post veto nominee who was going home, had the diamond power of veto, and he used it and nominated her in his place. So that's really the only reason why she is here. So that makes her case in being a backdoor victim even more nullified. So at 35th is Cory from BB25. If I remember correctly, he really wasn't considered a target at all during the early portions of the week. And there was a twist in this specific round of the season where there were two power of vetoes. So if there was only one power of veto, which Drake won the first one, Blue stays the target and she goes home. But the fact that there were two vetoes here and Blue ended up winning the second one, it caused for Cory to go up because there was no one else to put up. So that was the weird case in Cory where a twist caused him to be the target, nominated, and sent home when he wasn't in consideration otherwise. So at 34th is Ian from BB22. Danielle was the HOH, and she was intending on targeting David, if I remember correctly. And Ian's eviction had a bunch of very specific circumstances that happened that caused him to get booted. One, the target, i.e., David, had a power that caused him to take himself off the block. Then Danielle had to immediately nominate someone else. That caused Tyler to go up. Davon ended up winning the veto. She obviously wasn't going to save Ian with it, and she took Kevin off the block, though many people in the house were telling her to not to use it. This caused for Ian to go up, and due to the big alliance wanting to stick together, Ian ends up going home here. But he played in the veto anyways this week, which is why he is here. So at 33rd, we are moving on to Travis from BB23. He made a deal with Frankie, like within like the first competition, that they wouldn't nominate one another. So Travis was under the assumption that he was safe, and Frenchie was looking at other options to nominate, but Christian ended up winning that competition that got him safety. Spoke to Frenchie that caused him to be safe. Derek X won the veto, so he was safe. He took off Kylan off the block, so Kylan was also safe. And because Frenchie wanted a muscular dude out, Travis was really the only option left. But he also played in the veto this week, so here he is on this list. So at 30, we have Dustin from BB8. Jessica won HOH, and she was targeting the Donados, Danielle specifically, so she nominated them both on the block. But due to the America's Players twist, there is going to be a coup, and Eric literally had to campaign for Dustin to be nominated because America voted for Dustin to be the America's Players target. So this forced Eric and Jessica to kind of align with the Donados after Dick won the veto and used it on Danielle. But Dustin did volunteer himself to be on the block, but under a normal circumstance, this would have worked and he would have been safe. So he wasn't the target at all for Jessica until Eric convinced her to, and Dustin would have been safe without the America's Players twist, which is why he is on this area on the list, and he also played in the veto, but he also was affected by a weird circumstance. At 31st, we are moving on to Marcellas from BB7. So he is this low on the list because he played in the veto competition that would end up sending him home. So that's the main criteria here. But in general, Janelle never targeted Marcellas during the week, as she wanted Erica or Danielle, more so the former, but it became the latter after the former was off the block, to go home. But she wanted one of those two ladies gone. She was convinced by Chilltown to put up Marcellus, thinking that he would be a good pawn, but they always had the intention of voting out Marcellus, to the point where Janelle was literally blindsided when Marcellus left, though Marcellus had a sense that this was coming, as he told her that if he was nominated, that he would go home. Either way, this doesn't qualify as a backdoor because he wasn't the target at all, and he played in the veto competition that week. 30th is the person who was sent home right after Marcellus on this very season is Howie from BB7. So Chicken George won HOH and he wanted to target James, but James ended up winning the veto. We didn't really know who George was going to nominate afterwards, but he was heavily pressured by Chilltown, especially Mike Boogie, to nominate Howie at a last minute's notice, and this was during the doubles where you didn't really have much time left. So, Howie was never a target for George before. Someone had to come off the block, and he also played in the veto that week, so here Howie is on the list. At 29th is Matt from BB12. So, Britney wasn't targeting him whatsoever, as her main target was Brennan, and she was very insistent on Brendan needing to go home that week. But Brendan ended up winning the veto, and it put her in a very sticky situation. She didn't really know who she was nominating at that point, though the brigade members heavily pushed for her to nominate Matt, and she really freaked out about this. But once Matt started throwing Reagan under the bus, her hands were really tied, and she ended up nominating him as the post veto nominee. Anyways, he's in this category of the list because he also played in the veto, which makes sense because if you're in the final seven, your chances of playing in the veto, no matter what, are extremely high. At 28th is Judd from BB15. So this was during where Erin ends up winning HOH and she decides to target Jesse, or at least that's her initial intention. She wins the veto as well, which Judd ended up playing in, which is why he is this low on the list. And she is convinced by Helen to make a big move in sending home Judd, and Erin ends up doing this. Judd did not see this coming. He is a complete mess, and he ends up going home. So he is here because he, one, didn't play in the veto, and two, Erin wasn't even targeting him until Helen told her to send him home after Erin had already won the veto. So here he is. That 27th is Britney from BB23. So Kylan ends up winning this HOH, and he is targeting Claire for the first bit of the HOH. There's also the scenario where there were two vetoes where house guests can bet on someone to win the veto. So in Kylan's example, he bet on Alyssa to win the veto, and if you bet correctly, you also get a veto. So this caused for two vetoes to be had. I don't know how Karen was convinced to not target Claire anymore, but the point is, Claire came off the block and Brittany ended up on the block. But Brittany also played in the veto during this round, hence her being here. Next is Kaysar 2.0 from BB6, and the 2.0 is in reference to his second run on the season, since he was evicted twice on the season and he came back, hence him having a 2.0. So Kaysar comes back into the game and he makes a deal with Jennifer where she's supposed to put up two people from her own lines to backdoor James. The entire house came to an agreement that James would be sent home this week, so Kaysar was not the target at this point in time. He also played in the veto this week, so that automatically disqualified him from being a backdoor eligibility. It wasn't until after the veto where the friendship really had a discussion about who they should send home, and then they agreed that it should be Kaysar instead of James. So that's how that happened for him. In the subgroup at 25th is Jase 2.0 from Big Brother 7, and he is 2.0 because his time in Big Brother 7 is his second time playing. So, Jace and James somewhat had a deal where they wouldn't backdoor one another or really target one another, and James really did want Chicken George out of the house, hence him nominating Chicken George. But things ended up not going James's way once Chicken George won the veto. So the Softs discussed who they needed to nominate, and they all agreed that Jace needed to go up. James and Jace went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth about whether this was a backdoor, and it was James who correctly stated that Jace played in the veto, so it wasn't a backdoor, and they should know this since they were the two backdoor victims at this point of time in Big Brother history. Alrighty, so the next set of people are the ones where someone had to be nominated after the veto was won by a nominee, essentially, and they weren't thought about being nominated before this happened. So the first person in this group at 24th is Joe from Big Brother 8. So Jen won HOH, and she was clearly targeting the Donatos as she put both of them up, and she made it very clear, not only in her nomination speech, but going to the veto players to tell them to target the Donatos. Where Joe fit in this is that he ended up stirring the pot a lot and started going after Jen, so when Dick took himself off the block, sorry, no, not Dick took himself off the block. Danielle took herself off the block. Joe ended up going up, and because he had no ties in the house, which he ended up bragging about, he ended up going home. At 23rd is Annie from Big Brother 12. So Hayden nominates Brendan and Rachel for nomination with the intention of sending Brendan home. Annie is close to the couple at this point, so she would be the obvious replacement. And it's even worse because Brendan, the actual target, won the veto. And because everyone was already speculating that she was a saboteur, Annie went up and she easily went home. At 22nd is Cassie from Big Brother 13. So with her, there was the duos twist, meaning that if one person won the veto, both people in the pair ended up getting off the block, which is what happened with Dominic winning the veto, meaning he and Adam came off the block. And due to the duo's twist and then the golden key twist, there weren't many other options for the replacement nominee. So Cassie and Shelly ended up going up as the replacement nominee, despite Jordan actually wanting to keep them safe, and Cassie ended up going home here due to her weaker social game in comparison. So at 21st is Isabella from Big Brother 21. I didn't remember a whole lot of the details pertaining this round, so I had to look it up right before recording this, and Jackson did win the veto, and due to that, a replacement nominee had to be thought of. But apparently, Cliff had to be convinced by Christy and the power that she had to put up Isabella, where she and the people in that group told him that putting up Isabella would cause him to have the easiest week possible. So that is what happened. So Cliff wasn't targeting Isabella himself, especially in the beginning of the week, but outside circumstances, with that power and Jackson winning the veto caused her to go up. At 20th is Lawon from Big Brother 13. So obviously, Kalia, his former partner, went HOH and is targeting the two veterans, i.e., Rachel and Jeff. Jeff shows his ass to her and he goes after her verbally and then he wins the veto. And everyone knows that there's a twist where the person who's evicted this week will compete with one of the first four evictees to come back in the house. So this is looming over Kalia's head. And Lawon suggests to go up to be evicted so he could come back and get some special powers and whatever. So she literally wasn't considering him whatsoever. He had to volunteer himself, and this ended up happening. So if Jeff didn't win the veto, or if the nomination stayed the same, the scenario wouldn't have happened at all. At 19th is Joey from Big Brother 16. Caleb is the remaining HOH, and his goal is to send home Donnie during the week, and this is disrupted when Donnie wins the veto. Obviously, there needs to be some sort of thought about who the replacement nominee would be. Joey decides to attempt an all-girls alliance at the absolute worst time possible, despite not having relationships with most other women. And the women essentially reject it, though they don't tell it to her face. It gets around to the other guys, especially Caleb, and Joey decides to confess and come clean about it, and it caused her to go on the block to go home, where she wasn't even in consideration to be nominated before that happened. At 18th is Claire from Big Brother 23. So Tiffany goes out of her way to win HOH so she could keep Claire safe when everyone in the cookout knew that Claire was the next target. So Tiffany went against her word to win to save Claire, and she nominated Xavier and Alyssa for eviction, hoping to send home Alyssa. The issue is Alyssa ends up winning the veto, and Tiffany is in a huge pickle. Either she turns on her cookout ally and potentially gets dragged on social media, or she turns on the ally who she worked with the entire season in Claire, and she decides to turn on Claire for the bigger cause. And Tiffany really didn't want to do this, but she did it for the bigger cause. Hence Claire's placement here. At 17th is Kaysar 3.0, and this is in reference to his run on Big Brother All Stars. Danielle ends up winning HOH, and she's the first person not in the Season 6 Alliance to win HOH in the season. So someone from the Alliance is going home. She made a promise with Howie to not nominate him if he dropped, so he's safe. This causes for Danielle to nominate Janelle and her own ally, James, since she wants Janelle gone. Janelle ends up winning the veto, and Kaysar rejects her choosing him to play in the veto, which was dumb, especially since he would be the obvious replacement nominee if anything goes wrong, and that's what happens. Kaysar is the replacement nominee, and he is sent home on his birthday. And the final person in this little grouping, in my opinion, at 16th is Britney from Big Brother 14. So Frank ends up winning HOH, and he nominates Dan and Danielle for eviction with the intentions of sending Dan home. Ian probably would have been the replacement nominee if anything went wrong, but Ian won that ball veto thing before the veto competition happened, if I remember correctly, so Ian was safe. Jen, Frank's closest ally, ends up winning the HOH, and Dan decides to host his infamous funeral, which changed the trajectory of the gang. Frank is given information about the Quack Pack Alliance, and Brittany is thrown under the bus. So he gives Jen the green lights to take Dan off the block and to throw Brittany on the block, where he wasn't even considering targeting Brittany up until this point, and that's how Brittany ended up going home. So, this next subgroup includes people who weren't thought about being nominated until or after the veto competition, but there was an intention for the veto user or for the veto to be used, and it didn't have to be used by the nominee. So, the first person in this group at 15th is Cal from BB24. Obviously, this is due to a very special and odd circumstance. Brittany and Taylor were nominated for eviction by Turner due to the sides formed during Dyer Fest. Michael knew that he was being backdoored, and Turner really didn't hide it well. So Michael decided that he was going to use the veto, or win the veto, use it, and use Cal's race bullcrap against him to weaponize it to get Cal on the block and to get him sent home. Michael won the veto and executed this to perfection. And of course, Turner doesn't want to be associated with someone who could be seen as a racist, so he nominated Kyle, and this all happened after the veto competition. So the final person in this grouping at 14th is Cameron from Big Brother 25. Bowie Jane ended up winning the HOH, and she wanted revenge on Suri and Felicia, who alienated her for the first half of the season, despite them being allies, and then flipped on her without telling her. So she decided to flip from them a few weeks later. She wanted one of them, preferably Suri, to go home, but Jag and Meg tried so many times to get Cameron on the block, and she had a decent enough relationship with Cameron. They were eventually able to convince Bowie Jane that Cameron needed to go up, and I don't remember who won the veto. It was probably Jag or whatever. I honestly don't give a crap to find out. And Cameron ended up getting sent home due to this. So the next group of people that I have here are people who weren't thought about whatsoever being nominated until after the veto competition whatsoever, and they weren't being pressured due to someone potentially using the veto. So the first person in this group at 13th is Brian from Big Brother 10. So he had some influence in jury nominating Rennie and Jesse for eviction due to their fight, and Jesse ends up winning the veto. But it seemed like Memphis was going to be the replacement nominee. It wasn't until Brian and his allies did a bit too much where the House figured out that Brian was playing all sides, and they pressured Jerry to nominate Brian. And while Jerry did give some pushback initially, he eventually relented. At 12 is Mike from BB8. So Dick won HOH and he wanted revenge on Kale and Jen since they blatantly targeted him in the last week. So he nominated them for eviction, making it clear that he wanted Kale gone. It wasn't until the veto competition where Dick changed his mind, as Mike was the only one outside of Kale who was actively sabotaging Dick in the veto competition. It was one of those veto competitions where you can sabotage house guests playing in it, even if you yourself aren't playing in it. Dick warned Mike over and over and over again, but Mike didn't give an F. So Dick threw the veto to Jen and decided to send Mike up out of there. So at 11th is Jason from Big Brother 17, where Vanessa remained HOH, and there was this huge plan to get Austin up on the block and sent home by the Dark Moon Alliance, which unfortunately lasted only a few days. Austin ended up speaking to Vanessa about it not being a good idea once he got word regarding how much danger he was in. Shelly and Clay started being really paranoid because Clay remained on the block after the Battle of the Block, so they came up with this plan. The Sixth Sense decided that Jason needed to go, and that is how he ended up on the block sent home, when he wasn't even considered to be a nominee before all this happened. Its 10th is Braden from BB11. Jesse is essentially given HOH due to how the returnee and the HOH competition was set up, and he nominated Lydia and Chima for eviction, where Chima was the pawn and an ally of theirs, and Lydia was just rubbing them the wrong way. Russell wins the veto, and Lydia decides to take it upon herself to speak to Russell, where she pretty much kisses up to them and throws Braden under the bus. There was no consideration of Braden being a target before Lydia presented them this information, and they decided to send home Braden. So that's how he fits this category. At 9th is Ovi from BB21. The house guests made fun of him behind his back the entire time, but it didn't seem like anyone was actively targeting him. There was a point in time where Christy wanted Catherine gone when she nominated Catherine and Cliff together. Then her alliance wanted to send home Cammy, but Christy kept on changing her mind about their targets. And then Christy ended up putting Ovi on the block last minute, which shocked a lot of our allies. And once he was up there, it was pretty much a done deal that he was gone, especially when he told people about his power. So the final grouping in this video and on this list are people who were being considered regarding being a potential nominee before the veto competition took place, and these are the closest of the ones in this list that are the closest to being actual backdoors. So at A is Nick from Big Brother 15. So he is an interesting scenario since the HOH of the week, i.e., Aaron, wanted Alyssa gone the entire week. But there's an MVP twist at play, which, one, the entire house knew about, and two, the entire house knew that Alyssa had the power and was going to nominate the third nominee. So most of this will be discussed through that lens. Alyssa nominated Jeremy because they wanted him gone at the beginning of the week, but then he won veto, and Nick was then named the replacement nominee option, but because he rejected her offer for a deal, it caused for Nick to go up and go home. At 7th is Ameerah from BB24. So there was the festy bestie twist that caused people to be paired together, and this was kind of advantageous for Ameerah and her alliance initially, since they decided to pair up with someone who wasn't in their alliance. Turner ends up winning the competition over her, and he wants to do the easy move in sending home Taylor, and he put up Michael and Brittany as pawns. But because his male allies wanted to flip the house and used Michael, Brittany, and Taylor as the numbers that they needed, Turner was pretty much tugged into sending home Ameerah before the veto competition, though that wasn't his initial target, and he actually fought against the idea for a while. And if Nicole wasn't attached to Taylor due to the bestie twist, I do think she would have went over Ameerah, but because she wasn't, Ameerah was the choice that was sent home. Next is Audrey from BB17. So Shelley ended up winning HOH again, which would have put Audrey in the best position, since Shelley was the one who kept Audrey safe during the second week. But things changed because Audrey told Jason and Shelley some stuff about one another, causing Shelley to want to target Jason, but they cleared the air, and Shelley, as well as Clay, realized that Audrey was becoming a big liability. So they were discussing sending her home before the veto even happened. Audrey sensed something was off, and then when that huge fight with Clay happened, Audrey was essentially sent home and she pretty much gave up. So that is how she ended up on this list. But it wasn't a backdoor because she wasn't the initial target. At fifth, we are around earlier in the same season with Jeff from Big Brother 17 being here. So Vanessa remained in power, and for a lot of the week, she was actually leading towards booting James in that week on her HOH, but Austin was the one who really wanted Jeff out, since he saw Jeff as his biggest competitor and threat, to the point where Austin threw the veto, which Vanessa caught up on. Vanessa needed a reason to send Jeff home, so they came up with this huge, elaborate scheme and story, and they pretty much set Jeff up to where he was sent on the block post veto. But he wasn't the initial target, so that's why he is on this list instead of the true backdoor list. What fourth is James from Big Brother 9, and this is James 1.0. Since he was on, or he was evicted twice in the season, since he came back after being evicted the first time. So this is talking about his first duration. So, entering the week, Ryan seemed like he was going to target Chelsea, especially if the nominations remained the same, but she ended up winning veto. Then there was this huge plan that the other side was coming up with to get Ryan to send home Matt on his HOH by replacement nominee, but Sheila shut that down and really caused what would become Team Christ to come together, and they spoke to Ryan, who then put James up as a replacement nominee, which was a huge blindside to the other side, and they sent him home. So James was not the initial target, but he was blindsided. And it was probably closer to an actual backdoor than all of the others, despite it not really being a backdoor whatsoever. That's why it's where it is on this list. So at third place is Janelle from Big Brother 14. So this happened after the culture's twist ended and they were brought into the game as players. Danielle ended up winning HOH, and the immediate thought is to target Frank, though there's this thought in the back of her mind thinking that Janelle should go as well. That continued to fester and grow once Mike Boogie and Janelle started conflicting throughout the entire week and then gave the green light to send Janelle home. So that's how Danielle ended up doing it, and she was told that she would be the best player ever, sending home an icon like Janelle. So that's kind of how it went down. So while a part of her wanted Janelle gone, it wasn't like she targeted her from the very beginning, though it could be argued by people that she could be on the official backdoor list. Heck, I even put her there at one point. Second is Nick from Big Brother 8. So he is kind of in this grouping and could potentially be in the next grouping because Dustin entered the HOH with four potential targets: Kale, Jen, Zach, and Nick. So Nick was always on the borderline, but it seemed like Dustin wanted either Kale or Jen out first, hence him nominating them. But with Jamaica winning the veto and her making a deal with Jen due to religion or whatever else, they were given the great opportunity to send home Nick, and that is what they did. And the gold prize for this list at number one is Eric from Big Brother 6. So this is this high at the top of this list because some people could easily put it on the official backdoor list, but I decided not to. So Kaysar ends up winning 8 through 8, and his main goal is to cause as much chaos as possible, but he doesn't really know how to do it. He ends up nominating James and Maggie for eviction, especially after James refused to tell Kaysar who his partner is, and he tells James that he will go home if James doesn't tell him the truth. So it seems like he was fine with this at that point. It wasn't until after the nominations where the Sovereign Six comes together and they really come up with a plan to give James the veto and to send home Eric. So all that is why Eric is on this list and not on the official backdoor list, since he really wasn't the intended target, especially in the beginning of the week. So that concludes my list of the replacement nominees that went home that aren't official backdoors because they were not the initial targets. I am planning on making another list regarding the replacement nominees that went home, but I'm going to rank the people who played in around that they end up going in. So some of them were intended to be backdoored, but they just got pulled in the veto, while others weren't the target at all. But they played in the veto, they ended up being the replacement nominee, and they went home. So I'll get more into the details in that video. I'm hoping to be able to put out more content on both channels now that I have my laptop back. And it was really annoying because I was literally working on a huge documentary for a player that I haven't posted yet. And I was literally halfway done, but then my computer pretty much restarted. And now that I got a new laptop today, now I have to redo all of it. So I'm not looking forward to that. Anyways, you can subscribe to my other channel, Aloud. You can subscribe to this channel. You can subscribe to my Twitter and all of the other content that I have on both channels. And I'll be back with more content soon. Take care.